Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Community Q&A with Mayor Don Scott here on Facebook. Thanks for joining us. I'm Adam Hardiman with the Regional Municipality of Buffalo. We're joined today once again by, of course, His Worship Mayor Don Scott, our Chief Administrative Officer Jamie Doyle, and our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer Matthew Hupp. Here to take your questions during this fifth event that we've had as we recover together from this unprecedented flooding event that's impacted the entire community. We're going to get to your questions in just a minute, but just some general updates to begin. As always, you can go to rmwb.ca/recovery, sign up for real-time updates, get all the information as we on flood recovery as we handle this together as a community. Regular updates are there. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter for real-time information. Of course, this Facebook Live is our fifth in this series, but we'll be back again on Wednesday and Friday, beginning, as always, at 2 p.m. Our telephone town hall this week will once again focus on flood recovery. That'll take place at 6:10. You can head to rmwb.ca to find out how to register or to get that call out. As well, there's a special council meeting this week on Wednesday at 4:30. So you can check out the details. The agenda for that should be posted today or tomorrow, but you can get the details on that as well. Another way to interact with your community. And of course, the Pulse line is always available 24/7, 780-743-7000, rmwb.ca/pulse. So before we get to your questions, and if you'd like to ask a question, make sure to do that in the comment box right below the live video. These videos in their entirety will be posted at rmwb.ca. You can view last week's as well. Of course, information is changing ever rapidly in a situation like this, but there's still some good information on those calls, so feel free to check that out if you have time. We're getting a lot of questions right now about ATCO gas. We know that electricity is also a concern and an issue as they continue to do a lot of relights across the impacted areas. So just a message here about ATCO gas. The next 24 hours are critical in the natural gas recovery plan, after which ATCO will be in a better position to understand the timeline for re-energizing and relighting in impacted areas. Gas restoration is being tackled in a phased approach, so as soon as they can start to bring some customers back, as soon as it's safe to do so, they will do that. Residents can help avoid prolonging restoration time by not reopening the valve on their gas meter. Properties in the flood area will need to have their appliances inspected by a licensed gas fitter before ATCO will be able to restore gas at the premise. To look up how the re-energizing process takes place, you can do that at rmwb.ca/recovery. So just an update on ATCO gas and electricity. Everyone's working hard to make that happen as soon as possible. And like I said, more information on all those processes at rmwb.ca. So before we get to your questions, and thank you once again for joining us, we're going to have some opening remarks from Mayor Don Scott.
Hello everyone, and thanks for being with us. I want to begin by just acknowledging that today is International Firefighters Day. So if you know a firefighter, please reach out virtually and thank them for all the great work that they do. They have been going above and beyond. They've done it for a long time in this community, and we have a lot to be thankful for. Today was traditionally the start of the rooftop campout. Obviously, that's not happening this year, but you know, every firefighter deserves our thanks. Please reach out and thank them. So I spent the last few days and part of today in our downtown and going from house to house and talking to people who were impacted by the flood. I can tell you it's a heartbreaking scene. We are not going to get through this without significant help from the provincial government, and we're going to ask for help from the federal government. There is something called a DRP program that was historically in place, and I believe that our community is going to qualify for it. So we are talking to the province about that. So if you are uninsured or underinsured, just know that your mayor and council and your administration at the municipality is working hard to try to convince the province and the federal government to help this community. I think some of you may have heard that there might be some delay with the payments. They're $1,250 and the $500 payments. There does seem to be some bureaucratic nonsense on the side of the province that we are trying to navigate through. And as we get information, we will let you know, but we are working on that. And I know there's many people concerned about the water issue. We have Matthew Hupp with us today, who's the Deputy CAO, and he's going to be addressing that issue. As always, please reach out to your neighbors. There's an amazing group of people downtown who are just coming together. When I was down there were volunteers, there were friends and family helping each other out. It was just an incredible scene, and that's really what this community is about. We're going to get together through this challenge because of all those people, and because this is a community who knows how to pull together. So please keep it up. Just be safe. We're always concerned about COVID, and we want to make sure that everyone who's participating and helping out is staying safe. That's absolutely critical. So with that, I will turn it back to Adam. All the best.
Well, thank you, Mayor Scott, and thank you everyone that's on the line here joining us once again today for our 5th Community Q&A with Mayor Scott, as well as members of municipal administration. So happy to be with you and so happy to take your questions. We're going to obviously go to our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, Matthew Huff. We know we just made an announcement, probably most of you have seen, on the boil water advisory from Alberta Health Services. So we're going to go to Matthew in just a second. And we know it's a very challenging time in the community and everyone has different circumstances. And certainly, while health and safety has to be a priority, and it must be a priority, we recognize that there's going to be impacts on people. But we also want everyone to remember that this flood did displace 12,000 plus residents. It was probably the most devastating flood in the history of the community. And there's people that have lost everything or a big part of their lives. So just a reminder that we're all going through this together as a community, and there's people who are very severely impacted, and we're all going to have to sacrifice to make sure that we get everybody back on track. So with that, I'm going to go to our first set of questions. I'm going to combine about 3 of these, and we'll go to Matthew for a response. So thank you for these. First one is from Doris. Doris is asking, since we don't know what's in tap water, or in the tap water, sorry, I have pets that need bathing. Unfortunately, they will constantly try to drink it. I understand that one. I have a bulldog at home. Can it harm them? Yasmin is asking, can I drink directly the water filtered from my fridge water dispenser? And Christy also with, is it safe for animals to drink? So perhaps Matthew, provide just a general update on what we announced today and then speak to some of those individual issues. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will address the question specifically, but as Adam noted, I will take this opportunity to speak to the news release that has just been circulated. So as you all know, the water level caused mixing of river water with our treated water, and that mixed water was circulated throughout the Fort McMurray system. That system is 375 kilometers of pipe. So what I'll speak to, so that everyone knows where they stand, is specifically what communities this advisory does not apply to. Those communities are Conklin, Fort Chipewyan, Fort Fitzgerald, Fort McKay, and Janvier. Residents in Gregoire Lake Estates and Anzac who use water tanks with trucked water from the Conklin Water Treatment Plant are also not affected. I'll speak to that Fort McMurray First Nation 468 was originally named in the Boil Water Advisory. However, the community has secured a different source of potable water and as such is not currently affected. Alberta Health Services required a boil water advisory, and they issued a boil water advisory when our water was identified as being turbid, so no longer clear. What that has led to is what is like a film inside our pipe network. And so what needs to be done is all of those pipes need to be cleaned. The analogy that I can give you is it's like a glass with old milk, where cold water would not necessarily clean that glass properly. One needs to use some other type of cleaner to do the job. So the plan that I spoke about on Friday has been developed, a plan that will be implemented in 5 phases. The first phase has already begun, and that's the flushing and decontamination of the water treatment plant itself. The second phase involves temporarily installing flushing equipment on fire hydrants and continuously flushing them for 10 to 12 hours per day in Thickwood and Timberley. Phase 3 will flush the lower town site and waterways, of course both areas heavily impacted by the flood, followed by Beacon Hill and Sapray Creek in Phase 4. There will be a final 20-day final flush of the system. That's Phase 5. So it's a total of 120 days of work. So the release that we put out today suggests that this could take as long as the summer. However, staff are working to see if some of this work can be done in parallel, which would greatly decrease the amount of time required to do the work. The key message is to follow Alberta Health Services guidelines with regards to boiled water. Any water that is to be consumed should be boiled, and other uses are safe. So with that, I'll return to the specific questions. So Christy asked, is it safe for animals to drink? So the quick answer is not unless it's boiled. So the same consumption requirement for people applies to pets. Doris asks, since we don't know what's in the tap water, I have pets that need bathing. Unfortunately, they will constantly try to drink it. Can it harm them? Again, we follow the AHS direction not to consume the water itself. So I hope that that makes sense. Yasmin asks, can I drink directly the water filtered from my fridge water dispenser? I spoke to this on Friday. All home-based water purification devices differ in quality, and depending on how well they're maintained, they might still not achieve what is required. So the safest approach, and that which is recommended, ordered by Alberta Health Services, is to boil any water before consuming it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matthew. Thank you for those questions. Check out all that information on that announcement at rmwb.ca/recovery. So we're going to go to Mayor Scott for the next set of questions. We have a question from Angela as well as a question from Nancy. Angela asks, when are you asking for help from the federal government? This is too much. Nancy asks, will the municipality be providing support to the community to ensure that the supply chain for items such as bleach will be supported so that we are able to effectively follow a boil water advisory? Mayor Scott.
With respect to the federal government, we've already started that process. I did speak to the Prime Minister. He understands the situation in this region. I spoke to Bill Blair, who's another one of his colleagues, one of his ministers. So that process is underway. As far as the bleach and that concern with the boil water advisory, we are making sure the supply chain is up and running. I've spoken to all the stores in the region, so we are going to be in touch with them and doing our best to make sure that we have enough supplies in the region to match the demand, which makes perfect sense. So thank you for those questions.
Well, thank you so much for that, Nancy, as well as Angela. And if you would like to ask a question, as always, you can ask that question right below the video in the comment boxes. So please take them. We're going to answer as many as we can as possible. We're also going to try to group as many themes together as possible so that we're answering as much of the concerns, issues, opportunities as we can. So we're going to go back to Matthew Huff. This question is back to the boil water advisory announcement and situation we spoke about earlier. So 4 questions here. I'll go through them. First one's from Sonia. Sonia asks, we want the truth. What happened to cause the boil water advisory? Did part of the plant fail? Did someone mess up the chemicals? Was a valve opened? Did river water breach the plant? Sandra asks, you would have known about this a week ago. There are protocols in place. Why are you holding back information? You may think you are stopping panic, but you're making it harder for us to have faith in you and plan for these difficulties. Sean asks, what happened to the water that requires the boil water advisory in the first place? And Leon asks, is there any chance that sewer water has gotten into our freshwater system? So I think the main crux of those questions, Matthew, is what was the cause? And maybe just, again, provide an update on how it happened and when we knew the information we did and the steps that we took.
Thank you, everyone, for the questions. Just to revisit the how this happened, I will describe it. I'm an engineer and would love to draw a diagram too, and maybe we'll get that into the public messaging. But right now, what I can offer is that the level of the river reached the level of the overflow pipe of our treated water reservoir. That pipe is in place in case the treated water reservoir is filled too much, and it allows an escape port of sorts for the treated water. Unfortunately, because of the height of the river, the water ran the other way for a period of time. And it was when that occurred, was when our water was deemed to be turbid, and it was following that the boil water advisory was put in place. So I'll go through the questions and make sure that I've addressed them. We want the truth. What happened to cause the boil water order? That's what happened. Did part of the plant fail? No. However, going forward, we will be assessing what other infrastructure needs to be put in place to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Is there any chance that sewer water has gotten into our freshwater system? No. What happened to the water that requires the boil water advisory in the first place? So the water itself, as I described earlier, traveled through our distribution system into the numerous reservoirs that we have throughout the city. And that's why it's so important to follow our program to flush all elements of the water system itself. You would have known about this a week ago. There are protocols in place while you're holding back information. In fact, it was just over a week ago, and if you look at the original issuance of the boil water advisory, that's when it was put in place. We've spoken about this at each and every of our Facebook Live sessions, as well as the Thursday night town hall. There are protocols in place, very stringent protocols as to what we must do to return our system to a state that will then enable Alberta Health Services to lift this boil water advisory. Just want to touch on a question that the Mayor answered also. Will the municipality be providing support to the community to ensure the supply chain for items such as bleach will be supported so that we are able to effectively follow a boil water advisory? In our news release today, we talked about making bottled water available to those impacted by the flood directly. We are going to look now at providing access to bottled water to others as well. So we are looking at utilizing our own procurement muscle, so to speak, to have products available for community members as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for those questions. Please keep them coming. We know there's some significant information that came out today, and every day is a new day as we move through this together. So please stay in touch with us. Please contact us. Please get through to us on those numerous channels that we have available. We're going to do everything we can to continue to communicate the best that we can, all the information that's related to this. Truly another historic event we're going through as a community. So I'm going to go to our Chief Administrative Officer, Jamie Doyle, for this next set of questions. First one is from Alfredo. Alfredo is asking, will my electric bill be discounted due to constantly boiling water? About 15 hours a day, he says. I know that in Alberta, the various degrees of how you get electricity to your home, usually it's not the municipality that provides that directly, but you are correct that you have to expend electricity to maintain the boil water advisory put forward by the province, by Alberta Health Services. So a good question. I'll have Jamie come answer that. We also have Adrienne who's asking, are we still going to be charged for water that is not safe to consume, or are the charges being halted? So I guess a question about the water bill. Dia, recognize you from last week, Dia, so thank you for joining us again. A question here from her. Residents have been calling for reduced rates to water bills to offset buying bottled water or boiling water. Will there be any reductions to offset these additional costs? Will these reductions just add to what we pay in taxes? And from Leanna, is water delivery a possibility? So I'll ask Jamie to come up and speak to those questions.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Alfredo, Leanna, Dia, and Adrienne, for your questions. As the Deputy CEO just spoke to, we are going to be looking at providing bottled water for those who are affected by this boil water advisory. We understand that it is an incredible inconvenience. However, safety is certainly a paramount item for us to think about. As for Alfredo's question about the electric bill, as well as a call for reduced water bills, our senior leadership team is looking at all available options to help ease some of this inconvenience to residents for a boil water advisory. So sit tight, stay tuned, and we'll have some options for you shortly.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for those series of questions. Keep them coming in right below the video in the comment box if you'd like to ask a question here today. We'll be back with Facebook Live again on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, as well as Friday at 2 o'clock. We'll have a telephone town hall Thursday at 6:10. Find out how to get involved with that if you haven't already at rmwb.ca/recovery. Next set of questions, we're going to go back to Matthew Huff, our Deputy CAO. This one's from Vivian. I guess more of a statement, but thank you for this. Vivian is saying, I would much rather they take the necessary time frame to complete the flushing properly than jump in and then get someone sick. They are doing what is best for us. Why would people be upset about that? This question is from Eds. Is there no way to shorten the boil water advisory? September 2020 is too much. So Matthew, perhaps we can talk to the you mentioned there were kind of 3 areas of work in those timelines, so maybe reiterate that. Not that you need my help answer the questions. And then from Anne, has the RMWB brought in additional staff and experts to get the water plant online as soon as possible?
Thank you for your questions. I'll address Anne first. We have indeed brought in additional staff and experts to address this boil water advisory. Is there no way to shorten the boil water advisory? September 2020 is too much. Well, to the other statement from Vivian of taking the necessary time frame, we're not going to short circuit this. We're going to do the work properly. My request of staff at this time is that if there are other resources, technicians available, can we do some of this work in parallel to reduce the timeline? So certainly we'll look at that, but we won't compromise safety. And as far as what we're doing and why we're doing it, just quickly speak to this part of being a municipality. Just over 20 years ago, this type of approach would not have been taken. Today, because of incidents like what happened in Walkerton, there's no gray area. This is black and white. We are required to take certain steps to ensure that we meet the regulations as handled, as looked at by Alberta Health Services. We are doing that right now. There was another question that I saw coming in, and that had to do with if the water is clear, do we still have to boil our water? Well, Yes, you do. And I think that over time, all of our patience is likely going to wear thin with this. I live in the area as well, and I'm doing the exact same thing that we're asking you to do. But don't be fooled. Please follow the directions as communicated, even if the water looks and smells like it did before the flood. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matthew, and thank you once again for the series of questions. We know it's going to be continued conversation in the community, but we must have the best water in Canada, and we'll continue to work until we have it once again. So just getting some questions as well about various contact numbers, just going to change the pace a little bit here, but we'll go back to Mayor Scott for the next series of questions. If you look to contact the Red Cross, Red Cross is once again partnering with the municipality like they did after the 2016 wildfire, both in response and in recovery. You can contact the Red Cross at 1-800-863-6582. If you're looking for business recovery support, certainly something that's on all of our minds in the community is supporting small business and local business in the community. Wood Buffalo Economic Development Corporation has a line you can call, 1-855-923-2338. The Insurance Bureau of Canada for insurance questions, 1-844-227-5422. And our partners at Samaritan's Purse have once again returned to the community in support of our residents. And you can contact them at 1-833-738-7743. And of course, our Pulse line 24/7 at the municipality, 780-743-7000, rmwb.ca/pulse. We're going to go to Mayor Scott. I think, Mike, these are both the same questions, probably the same person, maybe not, but I'll try to combine them. Mike asks, at the beginning of the evac, I was told by a motel that the city, the municipality, was reimbursing all or some of the stays. Can we get an update on this, Mayor Scott?
Yeah, that's correct. For those that registered, there was an immediate assurance of reimbursement, and we're going to be taking steps, or at least I'll be taking steps, to see if we can reimburse those who may not have registered but were forced to evacuate. So stay tuned for that. I'll probably be raising that at this Wednesday's council meeting. So that's an issue that many people have talked to me about. Some people sat in line and then gave up and went to Edmonton and stayed at a hotel. So I understand that there's many people who did not register that are still looking to get reimbursed or some assurance of payment, and that's going to be raised by me at this upcoming council meeting. But I'm going to do my best to make sure that people, if we forced you to evacuate, if there was reason to cause people to evacuate, then we're going to do our best to make sure people get reimbursed for that.
Well, thank you, Mayor Scott, and thank you for the question. Just a reminder that there will be a special council meeting this week, be Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Mountain. You can follow along virtually at rmwb.ca/council. So that's once again, there will be a special council meeting this week, Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. You can follow along virtually at rmwb.ca/council. You can also find out more information there on, once the agenda is posted, which should be today or tomorrow, if you'd like to participate in that meeting as a delegate or to make a comment, either that you could submit to our legislative services team or during the meeting. So you can find out all the information there about that. Next question is from Pamela, and I'm going to take this one myself, and then we'll go to our CAO for a series of questions. Pamela asks, why wasn't there an Alberta emergency alert issued about our water? Water advisory until September should be on AEA. Not everybody has social media. It's a great question. So we were advised by AMA that ongoing advisories should not be on the Alberta Emergency Alert. Of course, Alberta Emergency Alerts are managed by the province through AMA, which is the Alberta Emergency Management Association. It is used primarily for emergency events specifically. So when you think about things like the wildfire, major emergency events, I think that's what they use it for primarily. The RMWB has posted notices across the region, including online and on all of our digital road signs. These messages are also amplified through local media, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our local media partners, Harvard Broadcasting, Rogers Broadcasting, as well as the Fort McMurray Today, for their continued support of the dialogue with us and making sure that we share that message with our residents. So thank you. We'll go to CAO Doyle for this next series of questions. I'm going to try to combine some here, Jamie. This one's from Mohammed. Mohammed asks, is the RMWB replacing freezers and fridges and their contents if there is no insurance coverage? Corinne asks, is it okay to stay in a camper trailer in your driveway as we have no means for shower heat? So I'll just put this one off to the side. And Carrie also asks, what will the RMWB be doing to help alleviate the stress? Will free bottles of water be provided to households? Boiling for everything isn't realistic. The water still tastes dirty. So thanks for those questions, Jamie. So there's one here about replacing fridges and freezers, that process, insurance or not. One about water support, given the boil water advisory from Alberta Health Services. And third one about camper trailers. Let's go right ahead.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Kareen, Carrie, and Mohammed for the questions. I'll start with Carrie's question about the bottles of water. As I mentioned earlier, we are, as a senior leadership team, looking at all options that we have at our disposal to make this a bit easier for those that are inconvenienced by this boil water advisory, and one of those options is providing bottled water for households. Corinne's question, is it okay to stay in a camper trailer in your driveway as we have no means for shower or heat? It's a great question, Corinne, and we're looking at that as we speak, not only to be able to stay in an RV on your property, but also looking at doing a temporary RV park as we did after the fire. And the third question from Mohammed is, RMWB replacing freezers and fridges and their contents if there's no insurance coverage at all? And unfortunately, Mohammed, we're not replacing freezers and fridges and their contents. We are, however, taking them away to the landfill, and there's no charge for that as well. So unfortunately, I would suggest reaching out to your insurance provider if you have one. If not, myself as well as the mayor and our senior leadership team are also chatting and speaking with the provincial government on disaster relief program. So we will make those that information available once we have the appropriate conversations.
So thank you for that, Jamie. Thank you for the question. Understandably, we've got a number of questions still coming in about the continued boil water advisory put forward by Alberta Health Services. So we'll have Matthew come back up here shortly about that topic. This topic's related about water systems, water tanks. So question from Charlene and one from Barry. So I'll read both and we'll have Matthew come up. Gonna fly here. Charlene is asking, what about hot water tanks in her household? How will those be cleaned of the bacteria and or silt? And Barry is asking, will we have to flush our hot water on-demand systems or hot water tanks when this is over? And will they be harmed with this silty water?
So thank you for the questions, and as promised on Friday, we will be following up on this latest news release with information for residents on how to go about maintaining their appliances, their fixtures, and you'll be able to find that on rmwb.ca/recovery. So I'll stop short of getting into specifics today. Want to make sure that that we're very clear about the messages we're getting across in this session, and then, as I say, we will follow up with those links to information for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you, Matthew, once again. So there's a question here for me that I was going to answer. So we'll go back to some water related questions under the AHS boil water advisory that was, I guess, announced as being extended again here today. So we'll get back to that. But Sandra has a question about the actual Q&A. Sandra asks, can you please post the Q&A after this? I can't watch the whole video. Sandra, absolutely. So as soon as the Facebook Live ends on Facebook, you'll actually just be able to hit a refresh button in the middle of the screen, and it'll automatically play the entire video. You can either go through the search bar or search right on the Facebook page for that. We also post the videos in their entirety to our actual website at rmwb.ca/recovery, and then you can also see them on our YouTube channel. But probably the best way to see the video, whether it's ongoing as it is right now or when it's over, you just press refresh right on that Facebook page and you should be able to watch the entire thing. If not, get in contact with us and we'll make sure that you can see it when you want. So a number of questions again here about the boil water advisory, and I'll try to combine some of them here so we can make sure to get as much information out to you as possible. So Marcus is asking, Matthew, how long do you boil the water? Tracy is asking, will you stagger when the boil advisory will be lifted by area, or does everyone need to wait the same period of time? Karen asks, if the water doesn't smell and it's clear, do we have to boil it? And Jamie is asking, what type of chemicals are being used to clean and decontaminate the system? So I'll ask you to come up. I'm just going to clear off some of these other questions here, if the public doesn't mind.
Okay, Marcus, boiling of your water should be a 1 minute rolling boil. Again, specific instructions of how to go about this, Alberta Health Services website. Will we stagger the boil advisory as we lift the boil water advisory? Question from Tracy. As we undertake the work, we will be asking Alberta Health Services if they will consider lifting as we work through the phases. Of course, they have the final say on that, but we will be, again, working to do this safely, but as quickly as possible. Again, question about if the water doesn't smell or if it's clear, do we have to boil it? Karen, yes, at this time you do. Please follow the boil water advisory. And Jamie asks about what type of chemicals are being used. Chlorine is the chemical being used for the flushing process itself. At no time will chlorine levels exceed that which is safe for consumers. Of course, before anyone consumes at the moment, we are still to be boiling the water. Thank you.
So thank you, Matthew, and thank you once again for those questions. If you have a question, we have about 20 minutes remaining in today's community Q&A with Mayor Scott, as well as members of our municipal administration. You get that question in the comment boxes just below the live video. Of course, the video will be available in its entirety following today's Facebook Live. So please get that question in if you have one. So happy you could join us once again today. Question here from Lou and a question from Janine that I'm going to answer. We did speak about this off the top, but we recognize not everybody has the time as you support your families to view the whole Facebook Live. So we'll just answer it once again. I just got to make sure I get the right information out. Lou is asking gas restoration. Several questions have not been answered. And Janine is asking, there's large parts of downtown that still don't have gas and electricity. Restoration and remediation work requires these services be restored. ATCO states that safety codes need to be engaged for re-energizing. Can this work be expedited, please? Well, I can assure you, certainly, I know our CEO may want to speak to it when he comes up in a little bit. It is being expedited, absolutely. A message here from ATCO Gas, who is responsible ultimately for that, the gas being relit downtown in all our impacted areas. The next 24 hours are critical in the natural gas recovery plan, after which ATCO will be in a better position to understand the timeline for re-energizing and relighting. Gas restoration is being tackled in a phased approach, so as soon as they can start to bring some customers back, they will do that as soon as it's safe to do so. Residents can help avoid prolonging restoration time by not reopening the valve on their gas meter. Properties in the flood area will need to have their appliances inspected by a licensed gas fitter before ATCO will be able to restore gas at a residence or a premise. Head to rmwb.ca/recovery. The process there for having your gas relit as safely as possible is outlined there. So please make sure to contact us if you have questions, or go to that webpage to view the process. Safety has to be of the utmost importance at a time like this, but we completely understand those pieces need to be in place. There's one for the CAO as well. So I'm actually going to go to Mayor Scott if he's here for the next series of questions. This question here is from Asthma. Mayor, can we have an explanation about the financial aid evacuees were supposed to apply for today?
Sure. So as I said at the top, I've heard that there's some difficulties with that, and what I understand is occurring is there's some bureaucratic nonsense occurring with the government of Alberta. They're the ones who committed to giving the payments out, and they're having some difficulty with it, I guess. So we're looking into it. We're trying to make sure that they follow up on their word, and anything less I think would be totally unacceptable. But we are following up with them. They have made the commitment that they were going to make these payments, and anything less than that is just bureaucratic baloney. So we're doing our best to make sure that they do that.
Well, thank you, Mayor Scott, and thank you, Asthma, for that question. Certainly something on a lot of people's minds today as we continue to work with our provincial partners. So next series of questions will go to our Chief Administrative Officer, Jamie Doyle. So thank you for these questions, everyone. We have questions here from Gina, Stacy, and Maddie. Gina asks, were the boat launches damaged? Stacy asks, with parks slowly reopening, I'm assuming water parks will be a no-go during the boil water advisory. And Maddie asks, will this affect spray parks from opening? Maddie, it's a good question. My girlfriend and Elizabeth and I were talking about exactly this at lunch today. So we'll allow the Chief Administrative Officer to answer that.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you for the questions. The spray parks from opening, that was a double question from Stacy as well as Maddie. It's possible. We're still reviewing that. The likelihood of somebody ingesting water at a spray park increases dramatically. So it's something that we're looking at, and we'll have something out as soon as we have an answer. And Gina asks, were the boat launches damaged? Thank you, Gina, for the question. We are certainly assessing all of that infrastructure from a drive-by and a quick assessment. They are a bit wet, so the parking lots are still a bit wet, but they look okay, but we haven't formally assessed those yet.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you for those questions. A number of COVID-19 restrictions as well. And I think we all have to remember that during a time like this. Went through a 1 in 100 year flood during a 1 in 100 year pandemic affecting not only our community but the entire country, much of the Western world. So that has to be an utmost concern here as well, because you also have staff that are impacted of those 12,000 plus that were evacuated. So something we're all working together through together as a community. So appreciate your strength, your patience, and your understanding, but we'll continue to work as hard as we can. A number of questions here about water safety. We know we talked about the boil water advisory, I guess, extension in a way earlier. You see that announcement at rmwb.ca. We know it's being shared widely in social media, and we have answered a bunch of questions about it. So DCAO Huff, I'll ask you to come forward. I'll try to group some of these together. Question here from Dana. Dana asks, what about watering fruits and vegetables in our gardens? Amanda, can you explain how it's safe to bathe in the water but not safe to wash our hands? I think you can do some washing of hands, but you speak to that process. Gina asks, can I fill my kid's kiddie pool? DCAO, this question for the DCAO as well, from Trina, can we fill outdoor pools? Ashley asks, how is the water safe to take a shower or bath but not safe to wash your hands? And Tina asks, if it's not safe to drink, how safe is the river to swim in? What is in our water? So maybe you speak to those topics. I'll leave them there for you.
Sure. I'll do my best to take these one at a time. Tina, if it's not safe to drink, how safe is the river to swim in? What is in our water? The concern and the specific guideline that was exceeded is what's called turbidity. And in simple terms, it's how clear our water is. Turbidity, or when you have water that isn't clear, could be an indicator of other contaminants. And so the actions that we take are the same as if those other contaminants are confirmed. The action is that we are to boil our water before consuming. So as far as the river and whether it's safe to swim in, I really can't speak to that. Other sources would have to be sought out for that answer. Ashley is asking about taking showers or baths, but not safe to wash your hands. So Alberta Health Services has offered some interesting advice on this, that to go that extra mile to ensure that your hands are clean, particularly in COVID-19 times. Washing your hands with soap is of course the first step. The second would be to use a small amount of hand sanitizer. So that's the advice that they have given us for showering and washing our hands. Can we fill pools? The advice that I would give on this is to consider whether your pool chemistry is going to be adequate. Of course, one can fill pools with water from a variety of sources, but you still need to ensure that the chemical balance is such that it is safe to swim in. And if it's safe to swim in, then I would then trust that it would be safe for all of those typical activities. I think I've covered them for the moment, so I'll turn it back over to Adam to take us to the next questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for those questions. We are committed to being here till 3 o'clock, but we know there's a number of questions coming in, so we're going to stay just a little bit past that 3 o'clock time, if we can. Understanding, many of the themes and questions are the same, but we want to make sure we get as many of those questions answered from you as an individual. So, question here from Chelsea. I'm going to go back to our DCAO series of questions about. I guess so. What's in the water? What's the reasoning behind it? And Chelsea is asking, I think you should share what happens if people ingest this water. So I know that Matthew spoke earlier about much of this is precautionary in a way and a very low actual risk, but in Canada we hold our water to the highest standards in the world, and that's definitely the case here in Fort McMurray and Buffalo, so maybe speak to that. Then she goes on to say that maybe people will understand why it has to be September. Also share if they can use the water for washing dishes, bathing, washing clothes. Abu asks, has COVID-19 been found in the tap water? Is the water plant disinfected contaminated with virus or other chemicals? Marcus asks, has testing been completed on the water to determine what contaminants are present? I know you spoke about turbidity, and that's really the main reason for the boil water advisory. So it's not so much about chemical contamination that people would think about. It's more of a turbidity issue, but we can maybe reiterate that. And Forrest asks, can you explain about the current contamination? What are the risks?
Right, so I'll start where Adam ended, and that has to do with turbidity. Again, turbidity is a guideline that we must meet, being a water provider, and that is the parameter that has been exceeded, and to ensure that we're all taking an abundance of caution, the boil water advisory should be followed. The question about what happens if someone ingests this water, hopefully nothing. But again, this is all about mitigation of risk. Where we have higher than acceptable turbid water that is unclear, the recommendation is to boil that water, rolling boil, for 1 minute before consuming it. My apologies, I'm just refreshing my knowledge of the questions. And again, is the water plant disinfectant contaminated with virus or other chemicals? Has COVID-19 been found in the tap water? And so this one, I'm going to give a very short, straight answer on this. No, COVID-19 is not present in our water supply. I think I've covered them. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for those series of questions, and thank you to our DCAO. We're trying to group together as many themes as possible. We understand that they don't always match up perfectly, but we're doing our best to make sure we get out as much information on this Alberta Health Services Boil Water Advisory announcement today, as well as any other questions you might have in flood recovery as we work through this historic event together. So some questions here about flood mitigation. I'll go once again to our DCAO for these. Corin is asking, why did the city keep deferring flood mitigation, and what are the steps to prevent this in the future? So I'll allow our DCAO to weigh in on this in more detail, but I can tell you there was no deferment of flood mitigation. As a matter of fact, if you think of Clearwater Drive, which is the roadway that goes, it was on Prairie Loop Boulevard, and when it goes around Clearwater Drive, that actually is a major component of the flood mitigation program. I believe that was a $150 to $200 million investment by the municipality over the last 3 to 4 years. So certainly played a major role in the mitigation of this event. We know that certainly there was a lot of impacts. It was very devastating, but I think that does need to be said, that there was no deferment of the flood mitigation approach, but there's always work to be done when the downtown or certain parts of your community or your city are amidst the confluence of 5 rivers. So just to be clear, I just want to make sure we're providing that information for you, but certainly Matthew can provide more of a detailed update on that. And then Carolyn asks, will the city make sure to build the berm at the height that it was originally supposed to be? So I know that we're, if you're speaking about the part that's already been built, it certainly is at the height that it was intended to be based on provincial regulation, but Matthew could speak to the other elements of it as well.
Hi, everyone. Adam filled in quite a bit of information about the flood mitigation program, but indeed the berms are being built at the 1 in 100 level, plus an additional freeboard to ensure that any event like the one that we just witnessed would be able to be resisted. We will keep going with the flood mitigation program and be about 50% finished by the end of this year. Council has continued to support the program through allocating funds, and we continue to advocate for funding support from the province and from the federal government for this work. So please bear with us. You will see a lot of trucks in action this summer as we move much of the material that's been stockpiled in the Lower Townside area for this very purpose. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew, once again. Thank you for those questions. We're going to go back to Mayor Scott here shortly. Not sure we have a specific question, but he wants to provide an update on the GOA funding for evacuees. That the information you can find it at alberta.ca/emergency. Announcement made last week. Funding process was open beginning today at noon. So Mayor Scott's going to provide an update.
Hello again, everyone. I'm very pleased to say that we just had a call from the minister within the last 5 minutes. The CAO and I went outside and just took a quick call, and that minister is Rajan Sahani. And that minister has spoken to me many times over the last few years and has a strong heart for Fort McMurray in this region. But what she committed was that if you were evacuated, you're going to qualify for those payments, and they're sorting out things on their end. So stay patient, but the payments should be sorted out here shortly. So That was, and she was fine with me relaying that message. So if you were evacuated, you're going to qualify. They just need to sort out some things on their end, but it's in the works.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you to the GOA for their continued support. And thank you, Mayor Scott, for that important update and for your efforts to make sure that that happened today. So next, we're going to go to Chief Administrative Officer Jamie Doyle. A series of questions here that I'm going to read. Jamie, then we take them one by one as we need to. First one's from Heather. There are reports today of some thieves trying to take advantage of the flood situation downtown, trying to enter properties. Has there been consideration to hiring additional security companies to patrol areas currently, as the RCMP are doing their best but have a lot of area to cover on top of the regular duties? I know this was done during the wildfire. Heather, you're right, it was done during the wildfire. Walterine asks, what about our seniors? Many don't have internet. They are also staying home to avoid catching COVID. They aren't seeing road signs. There has to be a better way to notify people that doesn't involve internet. That's a good question. Diane is asking, will the whole community then receive compensation, as this expense for water will be a financial burden? I think certainly we'd look at it from that perspective as well. So I'll allow CEO to weigh in on that. Danielle asks, that's very similar to the last question, but there's a different part of it. Will there be reimbursement for cost of purchasing water and the extra cost for electrical for boiling it? My husband is on dialysis, and water is super important for cleanliness for his dialysis. Thank you, Danielle, for that. Very important. And Chelsea, will a bottle service be provided by the RWB? So I think the first one, Jamie, was about security. Additional security measures in the downtown. Second one was about communicating with seniors, which is very important. And then we also have some questions about additional water costs and electricity costs. So I'll just leave those there.
Thank you, Adam. I'll start with Heather. And your question was about security. And unfortunately, this type of stuff does happen in situations like this where some of the most vulnerable people are exploited. And rest assured, I have spoken to the RCMP officer in charge, and they've increased their patrols throughout the downtown. So they're patrolling usually about every 10 to 15 minutes around the downtown to help curb some of that misbehavior. Walterine, you asked about our seniors. They're very, very important. We've been meeting and working through St. Aidan's Society as well as the Golden Years, and they have a seniors resource committee that happens once a week that we're constantly feeding information to. We'll certainly keep doing that. In addition to that, there's also the Vulnerable Persons Registry, which is also a very important piece of information that we keep as updated as possible and access information through there. Chelsea and Danielle, as well as Diane. So what we're looking at, of course, is every option we have that we can use to help ease some of this inconvenience to residents, and that is bottled service. And we are looking at ways to help through billing and billing cycles. So stay tuned. We're still looking through some of that. We'll have some information as soon as we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Jamie, and thank you, folks, for those questions. We're going to stay a little bit past 3 o'clock. We'll go to about 3:10 today. Obviously, a lot of questions coming in, a lot of questions that you have, and certainly a lot of issues in the community related to this, so I want to make sure to get as many in as possible. So we're going to stay a little bit past the time. So thank you for sticking with us, and if you're just joining us, thank you for tuning in here on Facebook for this 5th Community Q&A with Mayor Don Scott and members of administration. We are going to go to Mayor Scott, who might have an update here, but a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, you can do that in the comment box right below the video. The video in its entirety will be available on Facebook as well as on our website and YouTube channel following this. But we are also getting a lot of questions about Canada Post Service. Canada Post Service was suspended last week by Canada Post. As you may know, their main facility is in the downtown of Fort McMurray. Of course, your mail was kept secure in other locations, including Edmonton, while this, I guess, initial emergency passed, but Mayor Scott does have an update from Canada Post.
Thanks very much, Adam. So just in the last little bit, I've been in contact with Canada Post. They're working on a release, so they're going to update the community by way of a news release that'll be coming out shortly. They're hoping that their downtown branch is going to be open by Friday. and they're just doing an inspection and bringing in some equipment. And no mail is getting sent back to where it came from. It is going to be distributed here. So there will be a release coming out in the next little while, the next few days is the way I interpret that, giving details about how they're going to distribute mail to the downtown and packages that have been received. So it's in the works, and keep an eye out for a release from Canada Post.
Well, thank you for that, Mayor Scott, for that update. I know personally I did receive something through the mail today at lunchtime. My girlfriend texted me the item, so I'm not sure if that came through Canada Post or one of the other providers like UPS or Purelator, so they may be continuing service. But thank you, Mayor, for that update. And we ask everybody to stay tuned to Canada Post, canadapost.ca. I believe there's a number there you can call as well. So I know I went on earlier and saw they still had a service alert that went from red to yellow. So I think it's like no service to limited service, but please check that out. Got to go back to Matthew Huff, our DCAO. A couple questions about water. I guess one is more about the impact and the other is about the water itself. So this one's from Denise. The stockpile in waterways, I think we mean the soil stockpile, is that safe? Does the dirt need to be tested? And the other question, Matthew, is from Donnie, not the mayor. But Donnie online. How does water entering an overflow valve at the river level get to Thickwood and Timberley?
Thank you, Denise and Donnie, for your questions. So a good question about the stockpile in waterways. Is that safe? So that stockpile is intended to be used primarily for the additional berms that are going to be built this year. Does the dirt need to be tested? It is part of standard protocol to test the material, and I will certainly be following up with staff to ensure that is done. So good question on that one. How does water entering an overflow valve at the river level get to Thickwood and Timberley? So our treated water at the water treatment plant is pumped to reservoirs throughout the city. And there are three main reservoirs in the northern part of Fort McMurray. One serves Thickwood, one serves Timberley, and one serves Wood Buffalo. So I used a word earlier when I was describing the system throughout Fort McMurray as contiguous, and hence why Alberta Health Services put down a boil water order for the entire city. So that's why, because it is connected in numerous ways. Hence why we are continuing our work, our planning, to ensure that the entire 375 kilometers of pipe are flushed and disinfected. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Matthew, and thank you for those important questions from Donnie as well as Denise. So we're going to keep going here. We're going to stay with you to about 3:15 today. We recognize there's a number of questions coming in. We're going to do our best to get to as many of them as possible. This will be available in its entirety following today's Facebook Live broadcast, but you can always go to rmwb.ca/recovery. There's a place you can sign up there to get updates as they come out, as they're being issued by the communications team there at the Regional Emergency Coordination Center. So you can do that. You can always follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates as well. Pulse line is 24/7, 780-743-7000, rmwb.ca/pulse. And we'll be back with a Facebook Live again on Wednesday at 2 o'clock as well as Friday at 2 o'clock. There will also be a telephone town hall. You may recall we were doing them related to COVID-19. Last week we talked about flood update. This week we'll talk about flood recovery. So join us once again for that. You may be already on the call-out list. If not, you can go to rmwb.ca to find out how you can participate. We're going to go back to the DCAO, Mr. Huff. Two separate questions, but I think you're the best person to answer both of them. First one's from Paul. Would it be helpful to temporarily increase the workforce for the flushing of the water lines? I'm sure many professionals like pipe fitters and plumbers in the area that work elsewhere would help out. And then back to more water safety questions, Matthew. One from Marcus, Karina, and Roseanne. Marcus is asking, Many people are asking about watering vegetables. Please answer so we know for sure. I know that AHS would certainly have some guidelines on that, but I'll allow Matthew to weigh in. Karina is asking, he didn't answer the growing vegetables question. Well, we're going to try to answer it again, Karina, so I apologize if we didn't quite answer it specifically, but she's asking, are they safe to eat if watered with this water? What about the lawn? Is it safe to use for kids and pets if it is getting watered? Roseanne asks, what about water spraying on vegetables in grocery stores? I can't speak to them specifically. I know they probably bring in some of their own water, but Matthew can speak to that as well. And yeah, those are the three on that one, Matthew. So one about workforce and three about the vegetables.
I'll answer the question about the workforce directly. We are looking at what additional staff would be required to expedite our flushing program. But again, we want to do this safely. Our staff have the training and the equipment to do this and do it right. So I have tasked staff to look at how they may be able to speed this up. And certainly, if they need additional help, they will ask me for those approvals. So that planning is in the mix. Trust me, I was not thrilled with coming before you today to talk about a 120-day work plan. And anxious to see what we can do to do this quicker. But as per one of the listeners' statements earlier, which I completely agree with, we're going to ensure that this is done safely first and foremost. As far as vegetables, lawns, etc., I am going to defer completely to Alberta Health Services. So please look online, look at their directions with all of the many and varied activities. I don't want to mislead, so that is my advice. This is their boil water order. They have a plethora of information about how to do the many and varied activities we do on a daily basis. So please, I encourage you to take a look at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Thank you, everyone, for those questions. I'll continue to be here with you as we answer as many questions as we can. We'll stay with you for probably about 3:15 today, but just remember we'll be back on Wednesday and on Friday this week with 2 additional Facebook Lives, this being our 5th Facebook Live Q&A hosted by Mayor Scott as well as members of municipal administration. So we'll do number 5 today, number 6 and 7 this week, telephone town hall on Thursday night. And yeah, we'll continue on making sure we answer as many questions as possible. We're going to go to our Chief Administrative Officer, Jamie Doyle, for these next 3. Gina is asking, will the municipality support financial and labor support to Heritage Park and Marine Park? I do know that Mayor and Council do support an annual grant to the Fort McMurray Heritage Society, but certainly these are extenuating historic circumstances, an unprecedented event, so I'll ask Jamie to speak to that. Dawn is asking, with the hundreds of non-local workers arriving in Fort McMurray to help with restorations, what extra precautions are being taken to protect the city, the municipality from COVID-19? And Talkneys asks, for residents that their home was flooded downtown, do they have to worry about asbestos? I do know that we have some information on asbestos, I guess, mitigation, and how you can take a look at that, as well as mold. That's at rmwb.ca, but I'll allow Jamie to speak to it. And he also asks if owners don't have insurance, who is looking out for them and the folks helping them? So Jamie. Heritage Park, Marine Park, non-local workers, COVID, and asbestos.
Thank you, Adam. First question is from Gina. The municipality provides financial and labor support to Heritage Park and the Marine Park. Thank you, Gina. You would have heard the mayor speak earlier about the DRP funding. So what that is, Disaster Relief Program. We're currently looking through all the avenues of that to certainly assist those who need it. I'll go to Tockney's, who has a similar question. And Tockney asks about the residents and their home was flooded downtown, about asbestos and insurance. So asbestos is typically prevalent, more prevalent in those homes that are built in the mid-1980s or older. But what I would encourage you to do is certainly go to rmwb.ca, check our information there for some advice. Also, you can come to the Planning Development Department, and they can walk through with you some of the tips for disposing of asbestos. Now, keeping in mind, asbestos disposal should be done by a professional abatement person, so that it's handled properly. As for the insurance as well, that's a DRP question that we're currently looking at to be able to provide some support and information to the residents. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Jamie, and thank you for the questions. We're going to just have, I guess, 2 more questions that'll be for our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer, and then I'll ask Mayor Scott to give some closing remarks if he'd like. Certainly some updates right during this call about GOA emergency funding as well as Canada Post. But we'll ask 2 more questions and then we'll wrap things up for today. But you can join us once again on Wednesday at 2 o'clock with another edition of this Community Q&A with Mayor Scott and administration, as well as on Friday at 2 o'clock. Our telephone town hall will happen once again Thursday, this time at 6:10 p.m. And of course, we also have a special council meeting this week, Wednesday at 4:30. Question from Megan, asking the DCAO, can you please explain specifically what occurred to cause this problem? The community is in the dark about what caused this advisory. I know there's been numerous communications and a lot of information shared about it, but there's no problem reiterating what the cause of this was. So I'll allow Matthew to continue to answer that. And a question from Joe, what is the level of sand and sediment in the water? Will it damage my valves or pumps in my house?
Again, thank you for the questions. And based on the questions today, I think we'll do some more work to maybe put together some additional diagrams so that everyone can fully understand what happened. In essence, the river level rose to a point where the water entered an overflow pipe that facilitates or manages the level of our treated water, river water mixed with our treated water, which was then distributed throughout our system. As far as the level of sand and sediment, it's measured in what's called turbid units, and we should be very low, but the exceedance of that preferred 1 to 2 turbid units was noted, and that's what triggered the boil water advisory. So again, as I was saying earlier, this isn't a question of how much, but just that there was an exceedance that occurred, and that exceedance then triggers the boil water order, which then we, as the municipality responsible for treating and distributing the water, must adhere to. So I hope I've been able to answer as many of your questions as I could today. We'll continue to improve our frequently asked questions on this issue as we work to return everything to normal. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matthew, for that, and thank you for the question. We're going to have Mayor Scott wrap things up here in just a minute. And I'll ask Mayor Scott to speak to. I know there were some people who were saying they did lose sound there for a while. So, Mayor, if you, as part of your closing remarks, if you could speak to your conversation earlier with the government of Alberta about the evacuation payments and an update on that. We do know there was some issues today for that program that was announced by the GOA last week. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll have 2 more Facebook Lives this week, Wednesday at 2 o'clock, Friday at 2 o'clock. We also have our telephone town hall Thursday at 6:10, special council meeting on Wednesday at 4:30. You can always get a hold of us, rmwb.ca/recovery, on Facebook, on Twitter, on the Pulse line. Thanks for joining us once again. Thanks for the questions. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's Mayor Scott.
Thanks again, everyone. So just to go back to the update that occurred during this town hall, I did get contacted by the minister. Now that's the provincial minister responsible for the GOA payments. That's the $1,250 and the $500. Some of you out there who have applied for these payments recognize that there's an issue going on, and the minister, and I was very concerned about that, and I was very concerned that it might be some bureaucratic issue going on. Anyway, I talked to the minister. She assured me that the Premier's promise was going to be delivered on. So those payments are going to be made. They're just straightening out some issues on their end, and that will happen. So I was just on a call 20 minutes ago, me and the CAO, right during this town hall. We jumped out and took that call. So that's good news. So that's a positive. The other update that I gave was that we spoke to the folks at the post office. They're going to be issuing a release shortly. Just be aware that no mail is going to be returned anywhere. They're planning on opening the main mail sorting center downtown, open on Friday, and they're going to be issuing a release shortly about how they're going to distribute the mail to those who are downtown. So please be aware of that. I know that there's a lot going on, everyone, and there's a lot of challenges ahead, but we're going to get through this together. We have a team that's working really hard. I know that the water is a huge issue. Your mayor and council are deeply aware of that, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we get this issue resolved as quickly as possible. So thank you all very much for listening in, and we are doing this again on Wednesday. So take care, everybody. Stay safe and stay strong.